Welcome to the Political News Report, politicalnewsreport.com. In this video, we're talking about the impeachment of President Trump. But before we talk about that, I would like to take a moment to say thank you to the new subscribers that joined on BitChute and YouTube over the past few days. Friends, if you find value in this content, click the thumbs up button, click the subscribe button, and also share on social media. Now, on to the topic of this video. As you should be well aware by now, the Democrats have doubled down on the debunked Russiagate scandal and are trying to revive it through Ukrainegate. A few days ago, they took this preposterous story and ran with it all the way to launching an impeachment inquiry against President Trump. But just like Russiagate, Ukrainegate has some big problems. Problems which, surprise, 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 the Democrats and the mainstream media are failing to mention. What am I talking about? Well, in our first story today, from Zero Hedge, September 28th, 2019, quid pro nope, Ukraine reportedly had no idea about Trump withholding $400 million until month after call. A key element of the impeachment push against President Trump is the assertion that he withheld nearly $400 million in U.S. military aid to Ukraine before, quote-unquote, pressuring President Vladimir Zelensky, I know I'm butchering that, I apologize, to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. While Trump says he stalled the aid to investigate whether the new administration in Ukraine was just as corrupt as the last one, Democrats and their MSM lapdogs have been making the case that the aid and the request to investigate Biden are linked. But, according to the New York Times' own Kenneth Vogel, the Ukrainians weren't made aware that the assistance was being delayed reviewed until more than 1 month after the call. At least, that's what he said in a tweet on the subject on Wednesday in response to MSNBC's Rick Tyler, who asked why the $400 million in aid wasn't the top priority of the call. But that's not all, ladies and gentlemen. From The Hill, back in April of this year, 2019, Joe Biden's 2020 Ukraine nightmare, a closed probe, is revived. And I have to credit Zero Hedge for linking to this article. Neither of them are very long, and they're both worth your time to read. But basically what this story says is that former Vice President Joe Biden told an audience at the Council on Foreign Relations that he threatened to withhold $1 billion in loan guarantees to Ukraine if they didn't fire their top prosecutor. A video of Biden's appearance at the CFR is linked in both of these stories, and I will also provide a link in the show notes so you can watch it yourself. But according to The Hill, Ukrainian officials said that Biden left one very important fact out of the story that he told his CFR audience. Shokin, the prosecutor that was fired, was leading a wide-ranging corruption probe into the natural gas firm Burisma Holdings that employed Biden's son, Hunter Biden, as a board member. The Hill also reports in this story that Hunter's U.S.-based firm, Rosemont Seneca Partners, LLC, received regular transfers into one of its accounts of more than $166,000 a month from Burisma from spring 2014 through fall 2015, when Vice President Joe Biden was the main U.S. official dealing with Ukraine and its tense relations with Russia. So, in other words, not only does the evidence contradict the Democrats' narrative that Trump threatened to hold the $400 million from Ukraine unless they opened an investigation on Joe and Hunter Biden, it also provides probable cause for an investigation into Joe Biden for doing the very thing that the Democrats appear to be falsely accusing Trump of doing. With that said, Our third story, Florida Attorney General dropped Trump U fraud suit right after GOP candidate, that being Trump, gave her $25,000. This is from rawstory.com, going all the way back to June 7th, 2016, before the election of Donald Trump to the presidency. And if I can just read a little bit from it to you, and again, this is not very long either, and it's also worth your time. Florida's Republican Attorney General, Pam Bondi, personally asked Donald Trump for a campaign contribution before dropping out of a lawsuit charging Trump University with fraud. Bondi asked for the contribution before publicly announcing she would join a New York State suit against Trump University. 4 days later, she received a check from Trump's foundation. Bondi subsequently announced she was no longer suing Trump, citing insufficient grounds to proceed. The check was in the amount of $25,000, and, according to Raw Story, the donation was in violation of rules governing political activities by charities. This story also goes on to talk about the fact that the complaints Bondi's office received about Trump University actually provided more than enough justification for the Florida Attorney General to pursue the suit, despite her claim otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, a first-year law student could get an indictment against Trump on those facts. So why have the Democrats gone to the lengths that they have, pursuing fabricated stories like Russiagate and now Ukrainegate? Why follow up the failed Russiagate narrative by doubling down and fabricating another story about Ukraine? And why are Democrats going to these lengths of discrediting themselves when this golden nugget, this silver bullet, the Pam Bondi story, has been laying there out in the open since before the 2016 election? And why does the mainstream press continue to ignore this story? Well, Joe Biden, aside from being a crusty, corrupt old gas bag, has a Ukraine problem, as previously mentioned. And there is one theory out there that does make some sense, that perhaps the Democrats, or at least a faction in the Democratic Party, are not only trying to take down Trump, but they're also trying to get rid of Biden to make room for a more viable candidate. To me, that does make sense, because if the Democrats nominate Joe Biden as their presidential candidate, then they will essentially be repeating that winning strategy from 2016 of putting up a crusty piece of corruption that's been circling the rim of the D.C. Beltway for decades, like they did with Hillary Clinton. And we all know how that turned out. However, if I may offer my own humble observation, I believe that this is part of a divide and conquer strategy that the people, that the Trumps and the Bidens and the Clintons and the Obamas really answer to. And the purpose is to keep we the people divided and conquered. Because if they can keep you caught up in the left versus right, Democrat versus Republican dichotomy, you'll never bother to consider that the same hands that pull the Democrat strings might be the same hands that pull the Republican strings. I did a video on my theory. It's called Controlled Opposition. I'm showing it right here. And if you've stuck around this long, you might just find it worth another 10 or so minutes of your time. It will also be linked in the show notes. Also, if you've stuck around this long, then click that thumbs up button, and also subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And remember, the political is personal.